Hey there folks, so welcome to Spectrum Pulse, about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be finally talking about the newest album from Dolan, titled Kill the Wolf. But first, let's talk a little bit about poetry. Now, you'd think this would be a concept that's discussed a fair bit more frequently in hip-hop culture, but it's a lot less common than you'd think than you could typically describe rappers as poets while keeping a straight face. Putting aside the technical considerations, which tend to be fluid with poetry anyway, that label as a poet, fairly or not, tends to imply a level of writing sophistication that hip-hop can occasionally fall short of, especially in the mainstream, and especially nowadays with a greater focus on more production over lyricism. I don't like it, but it happens. But if you start digging deeper into the underground, you'll actually find a fair few artists who have an established background in a more literary, poetic circle. And it shouldn't surprise many people that many of these poets I'd also identify as some of my favorite rappers, like Dessa or Sage Francis. And if you want to go even deeper, you gotta talk about B. Dolan, rapper, activist, and spoken word artist from Rhode Island, affiliated with Sage Francis, and who broke into the scene in 2008 with a harrowing and absolutely fascinating album, The Failure. And for a hip-hop traditionalist, The Failure is far from an easy listen. The beats and production are very minimal, much more focused on the words themselves, and when they are there, it's abrasive and nasty as hell. And yet the bars themselves, they earn that harrowing production and incendiary record targeting politics, religion, and philosophy with such naked abandon that it chars pretty much everyone in its path, including B. Dolan itself. It's a great record, but not an easy listen. And thus, it's not exactly surprising that his 2010 record, Fallen House Sunken City, was a slightly more conventional hip-hop album in terms of its construction. Still politically charged, still with abrasive and nasty production, still with fiery and intense wordplay, but I don't know, it didn't quite have the same unbelievable moments of visceral intensity that came with songs like Cade or Joan of Arcadia and Sky Cycle Blues, with the sole exception being the haunting story track Marvin about the death of Marvin Gaye. Worse still were the elements of the conspiracy theory nonsense that I hate in political albums, creeping into material on tracks like The Reptilian Agenda. Yes, like everybody, I appreciate the shots at Dick Cheney and George Bush as much as anybody, but Illuminati horseshit is patently ridiculous on a fair bit more dispiriting and honest examinations that people are just lazy, stupid, overwhelmed, or incompetent, stuck in venial sins than some grand conspiracy. Think The Wire instead of House of Cards, if that makes any sense. But even beyond that, I was definitely in the mood for some hard-edged politics and philosophy, and right now, rap has all the more reason to get more socially conscious and political. So, after a 5-year wait, how does Kill the Wolf turn out? Well, it turns out exactly as strong as you would expect, managing to combine some of the visceral gut punch of his best spoken word pieces with rough-edged beats that might flirt with some almost post-grunge and rap rock, but still manage to feel fresh all the same. What you can definitely tell with this album is a level of care and meticulous craftsmanship that came with the 5 years since B. Dolan has released a full-length LP, equaling probably his most consistent work to date and a damn great rap album that I can easily recommend, even if I know, once again, not especially an easy listen. So why do I say that? Well, part of it is that B. Dolan is himself. What he brings to his work is a level of visceral intensity that makes his political material feel very urgent and definitely populist. The guy's been an activist for years, and pitching the conspiracy theory nonsense in favor of deeper insight and more nuance, definitely a welcome change, a step in the right direction. It helps he's got a handle on that desperate edge to make so much of Sage Francis's conscious material work as well. The similarities between the two artists is kind of unmistakable, and I'd be lying if I said that B. Dolan's persona doesn't quite strike as hard, mostly because his stories don't feel as intensely personal, at least not compared with what he had on The Failure, but then again, that's kind of sowing so deep it gets uncomfortable. But what I would argue is that B. Dolan can play to a larger audience of Kill the Wolf, mostly because tracks like Alright, Stay Inspired, and even Graffiti Busters play for simpler targets and asserting lyrical dominance and just taking apart his enemies piece by piece, and he's brutally effective in that lane. And a big part of that strength plays into the production, a ramshackle blend of rap rock and industrial flavored hip-hop that can definitely feel some late 90s inspired, but still manages to bring in enough instrumental ideas to stand out while preserving some melodies and really good hooks to stick in the brain. Lazarus pairs guitars with eerie, mournful keys that eventually roars into noisy, distorted drums, the skittering and low strings against the textured percussion and squealing howl of Graffiti Busters, the scratchy rumble of Stay Inspired, that features one of the more memorable melodic stingers on the chorus that I really like. And then there's Jailbreak, which might as well feel pulled straight from 1999 as an outright rock track with chugging grooves and Dave Lamb delivering a post-grunge inspired chorus and guitar solo before Aesop Rock's verse. Of course, the grimier, more industrial edges definitely rear their heads, playing the warped, glitchy sample of Men Without Hats' Safety Dance on Safety Theater. That's genuinely chilling. The sparse industrial elements accented with a fuzzed out melody on Run the Machine, to the noisy percussion and atonal guitar fragments that pepper Alright. And yet on some level, this album is at its most effective on its quieter moments, like the echoing hollowness of These Rooms with the rattling strums, especially with those pianos, or the funereal Memory of Bombs, the latter of which doesn't exactly work as well with the hook as I'd like, but still's got some real impact, especially with the verses and bars. And easily the instrumentation that hits the hardest for me is Who Killed Russell Jones? Sparse cymbals, bit of guitar and strings, accenting live, echoing vocals from B. Dolan himself, one of the most potent and biting spoken word pieces I've heard in a while. It's a piece digging into the life and unfortunate death of Old Dirty Bastard, and as everyone tries to absolve themselves of blame, the slow realization creeps in that everyone deserves their fair share of it. From the Wu-Tang Clan who didn't step in on time, to the promoters who fed him drugs, to the record industry who shoved him under the spotlight, to the fans who were enamored of the image but not of the man who really shaped it and never want to go deeper. It truly is one of the most gripping pieces of raw poetry I've heard all year, definitely one of the best, and in a sense that becomes a bit of a problem for this album. I'll say it, B. Dolan is a great rapper, but his spoken word poetry is on an entirely different level which can hit like a ton of bricks every time, and they get a little bit exasperating when his actual bars don't really aim to cut as deep, even with the wealth of imagination on display. Graffiti Busters parallels Dolan's brand of wordplay and taking down graffiti into the destruction of his rivals, and that's a potent and layered metaphor when it comes to the role of street art in hip-hop, and what it means to actually destroy some of it. Safety theater is more inside B. Dolan's usual wheelhouse in terms of attacking government surveillance and the price that people pay for accepting it, but the most telling lines are when he points out that the insurance companies never really pay out for what really kills you in the end. The price you pay for your security ultimately never paying its due. Run the Machine goes deeper into the bowels of this civilized machine, with Dolan disclosing his own compensation before diving into working class desperation and anxiety as his flow accelerates and diversifies in double times, attacking trickle-down economics with ruthless efficiency. Great bars there. And that's before we get to the heartbreakingly nuanced Memory of Bombs, initially taking the perspective of an ostracized, lonely, and angry kid who was never able to succeed in school, becoming jealous of those people who get degrees, becoming a cop who takes out his hatred on anyone who considers below him, whether they deserve it or not, and the whole wretched system continues yet again destroying more lives. So okay, what thematically ties all this together? In this case, it's a question not of legacy or what comes after death or even the celebration of life, but more of a desperate hope to wring something better out of it before death's chill inevitability, even if that hope might be fleeting. The album opens up with B. Dolan belling out for Lazarus to break free of his tomb, yet throughout this album you could make the argument that with the oppressive, broken system, Lazarus would be better off underground. But life is clung to regardless of the fact that everything might be forgotten or just consumed in the end, which circles back to the touring close-up track, These Rooms, where B. Dolan uses the hotel rooms as metaphors, representing how the world so quickly forgets you if you're left behind unless you can make something that's worthy of impact. For B. Dolan, it's spreading that message and fighting to stay inspired and focused. And even despite his awareness of death's inevitability, he's gonna fight on regardless to give at least something back, at least give some people some sort of hope. In short, I really like this album. I don't quite think it's perfect. I think there could be a little bit more roughness or grit or texture in the percussion overall, perhaps darken the outright rock elements just a little bit more, give them a little bit more chugging groove. And songs like Rats Get Fat do feel a little bit too on the nose for me as a parable about abuse of wealth and the comeuppance of that person. And I do think that B. Dolan could push himself into more visceral territory to match his best work a little bit more often in his actual hip-hop songs to match his spoken word pieces, but still, Kill the Wolf is an excellent listen. For me, a strong 8 out of 10 and definitely a recommendation if you're a fan of Sage Francis-esque poetry with an edge and an urgency that demands your attention. And even if you're not, it's probably B. Dolan's most polished rap record to date, so definitely check it out regardless. Count on it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.